Hi friends, my name is Host Eric, and this video is about cognitive functions. It's about bias, and it's about understanding why some people have a great deal of trouble processing bias, what it means, and what its impacts are. So I got a comment on a video I put up a long time ago. The gist of that video was everybody has bias. That's not informative. And the commenter said, accused me of vapidity of all things, and said, if you are conceding that you have bias, then your point is discounted entirely. Of course, that's complete nonsense, and it baffled me that somebody would say such a thing, but I think I got some insight last night as to how and why someone might think that. So, it's pretty easy to explain why bias doesn't inform us about correctness. Let's say you have two parties who are both biased strongly in favor of their respective positions. And let's imagine that their positions are exclusive of one another and that one of them is correct. They're both heavily biased, and yet one is still correct because, while they're each biased in favor of their own side, a disinterested third party, in other words, somebody who's playing the referee role, trying to be fair, hear all the evidence and make a determination, well, he doesn't have an interest in the evaluation of this. And so, regardless of the fact that both parties are biased, since he's going to rule in favor of one, that one is correct, and you'll note that it is wholly biased at the same time. There are other reasons why bias isn't informative, and it's because we have different kinds of biases, right? Like, it is the case that you might have an interest, like let's say you're a judge in a court, and you're ruling on a case of Monsanto versus the Farmers Co-op or something, but you have a lot of stocks in Monsanto. Well, that's a conflict of interest, which is to say, it creates a bias that rewards you for siding with one side, and you suffer a loss for siding with the other side. Since you're an interested party with a bias, you, as a judge, should recuse yourself. And it's not because it's inconceivable that the judge could be fair and not consider his own interest in Monsanto. I'd like to think that most judges are capable of a disinterested calculus, regardless of if they have an interest. But with American jurisprudence, we say we want to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, so that's why there's a requirement they recuse themselves in such a circumstance. You'll note, again, another example of how bias is not relevant in determining what's correct. If you go to a basketball game, the red fans are on one side, the blue fans are on the other side, and there's a foul called. The red fans are all, yeah, good call, good call. Blue fans are like, boo, terrible call, because they're all expressing their perspectives from their bias. And yet, again, the referee will make the call, and you look at the replay, and half of those extremely biased people were correct. The other half were wrong. So we know that bias isn't informative about whether or not you're wrong, though it might be informative about why you were wrong. So, indeed, if you are enamored with your bias too much, and different cognitive function stacks are more at the mercy of what they want rather than what is correct. When I'm wrong, as I sometimes am, it's not because of any bias, because my only bias is towards being correct. I'm not married to any particular position. I'm not trying to win or whatever. I just prioritize being correct, which means I'm eager to be corrected, and if it's the winning argument, to adopt that argument, jettison my old argument, because that's what I'm biased towards, is being correct. Obviously, a bias towards being correct does not make you less correct. May not make you more correct either, though. Because at the end of the day, bias, like my emotional state, is not informative about the accuracy of the words in question. And that's what we're evaluating when we're evaluating something, to see what's correct. We're evaluating words, arguments, and properly parsed language to determine whether or not a given claim, warrant, impact, withstands scrutiny, whether it stands on the flow or is knocked over, whether it can be rebuilt, etc. And at the end of such an exchange, both parties were arguing as competitors do, right, against one another, zero-sum competition. Both parties wanted to win no matter what. So they were going to say whatever they could say to win, and this guy was going to say whatever they could say to win. They were each biased heavily in favor of winning. One team won the round, and in that instance, it doesn't make them right. So, yes, you have a debate contest where rhetorical exchange is exercised to determine who had the best arguments and won the round in this instance. But competition debate, it's not thought in competition debate because it's a sport and not dialectic for the purpose of generating truth. It's not thought that whoever wins the round in a debate tournament was correct. And the reason for that is better debaters can beat worse debaters, even if the better debaters have worse cases. In other words, are less correct. Regardless, it's never their bias that makes them incorrect, because each of those debate teams is trying their very hardest to put the best case together possible for the neg and the best case together possible for the af. They may fall short and fail to win, but because of what they're doing fundamentally, right, you can see how bias doesn't come into play at all with the debaters. They're not attached to either the af or the neg, except insofar as it's their stronger case. You do see bias impacting judges sometimes, and they're incorrect in their decisions because of their bias. For example, one time I saw a debate round where a judge at the end of it, and it was a finals round in a tournament that had this one really kick-ass public forum team. They destroyed the other team in the finals, but it was a 3-judge panel. I was one judge on it. The other 2 judges voted for the losing team. One lady, because she made kind of a rookie mistake, but it's understandable, she said, well, Team A conceded Team B framework, so that means Team B wins. Of course, it did not mean that, because the reason they conceded the framework was because they had already made the argument clearly and effectively that they won under their opponent's framework. But she didn't get how framework mechanics work, and that was an honest mistake, right? I could excuse that. The other judge, though, voted for the wrong team on the following reasons. He told the AF team how the position they were arguing was wrong, and that if he had been they, he would have made all these other arguments, and you couldn't win that side anyway because it was wrong. Well, of course, that's not how you're supposed to judge a debate round. The judge doesn't come in to vote for the side of the resolution that he thinks is correct. He listens to the arguments made in the round and votes on only the arguments made in the round and who won on the flow. He was a lay judge. He didn't know what he was doing, and accordingly, bias impacted him dramatically, making him incorrect. But the reason he was incorrect was not because he was biased. That may have been what caused him to go down the incorrectness road. But the reason what he was saying was incorrect had to do with specifically what he was saying. So he was saying, well, the reason I voted for the neg is because it's a bad idea to do what the app is advocating. Okay, well, that's that guy's thoughts, not the debaters. None of the debaters said any of those things. And accordingly, he didn't vote on the debate round. He thought he was going to tell everybody what the correct position was. In that case, you see, bias obviously renders somebody wildly, woefully incorrect. But it's not the bias itself that's incorrect. It's the wrong things he's saying. And we can always evaluate words on their merits. When we focus on the person, their motivations, etc., their feelings, we are disallowing words to do their good work, the powerful good work that words can do. But I think I got a sense of why it is that I got that comment from some random guy, and why I encountered this periodically in the past, as I try to explain the role of bias in evaluating things. And the reason I think I was informed about it was because I was talking with Tuts last night, and he said something that just blew my mind. He said something about hating ESTPs. And then I pointed out to him, well, my daughter's an ESTP, so thanks for letting me know you hate her. That's fine. And he said something along the lines of, I'm sorry I said your daughter was bad. I was like, wait a second. You didn't say my daughter was bad. You said you didn't like ESTPs. You hated ESPs. But obviously, if you hate something, that doesn't mean you believe it should change or not be in existence. I hate mayonnaise. I don't think mayonnaise should be something else. I don't think there's something wrong with mayonnaise. I hated Bill Walton. I did not think that Bill Walton should be executed. I did not think that there was anything wrong with him inherently. I just didn't like the fact that he was ruining basketball games that he broadcasted. Is that something that was wrong with him? Well, there's nothing wrong with him, right? It was not really a way that he needed to change. The onus there was on ESPN. They needed to not have him in the broadcast booth because he did an objectively terrible job. So yeah, there are plenty of things that I don't approve of, that I don't like, that I find offensive. But what's critically important to remember is that your feelings cannot inform you about whether the other person should change. Because, for one thing, just because you have some sort of attentional incompatibility with somebody and don't like them because it feels to you like they're always thwarting your efforts to get work done, in my instance with words, trying to dissemble and insist that words don't mean anything, and just contradicting oneself left and right, But it was very revelatory and explanatory about the bias thing, right? For people who have a very weak relationship with introverted thinking, they are going to move through the world apparently with the impression that if they don't like something, that's indicative that there's something wrong with that thing. So it's understandable then that people who don't have a good relationship with TI are going to think that bias is insurmountable. That bias correlates directly with wrongness, and you can't be both biased and right, because, of course, if you go through life thinking that if you don't like something, that means there's something wrong with it and it needs to change, well, then, you indeed are going to always be susceptible to your bias. And you might still be right, because just because you're strongly biased in favor of something doesn't mean it's wrong. But it is the case that people who are married to what they want to be the case and intentionally ill-equipped to determine what is the case, because instead of having a objective deliberative function like TI, they only have the subjective deliberation function, and they can't grasp what I'm saying. So I have these arguments with people who are just utterly wrong. But most importantly, what they are is completely unwilling to make a case, right? To put their reasoning under scrutiny so that everybody can evaluate it independently, because they don't want it to be negated. As a disinterested calculator and somebody who's never going to be, or almost never going to be, more likely to be wrong with increased bias. It makes sense that I wouldn't be more likely to be wrong with increased bias, because I don't think my feelings about things are informative about the worth or value of those things. My feelings can certainly sometimes inform me that a boundary has been crossed. I can be mad and annoyed at people not listening to my words or letting them do their good work. I can be triggered into quite a forceful defense of what I'm saying, etc. And I'm subject to emotions and such. But what's critically important for anybody who's not intentionally equipped to do the parsing themselves the way that I do, to remember that it doesn't matter if I'm livid angry, calm as a bucket of rocks, nervous, agitated, high, sprung. It doesn't matter. The tone might change, the speed of delivery might change, but my words will remain the same, whether I'm furious or calm. And one thing that I've had to work on and learn is that if you don't say the right words calmly, people will say, you need to calm down, and your emotions are the problem. Of course, that's always wrong. My emotions are never the problem. The reason I'm upset is because they're wrong and giving me pushback, whoever they are, pharmacy worker at CVS or whatever. Still, I try not to get heated anymore at all. And I've been very calm the last couple of days in my streamings, but I still get accused, and people talk about my emotions all the time. Your ego is making this happen, Eric, or you are too proud to be wrong, or something. Of course, it doesn't matter if my ego is driving the bus. It doesn't matter if I'm proud. It doesn't matter if I'm scared. It doesn't matter if I'm sad, angry, happy, whatever. Because those things have nothing to do with the words I'm saying. So, well, TI polar, ESFP TI polar is not going to be able to follow, process, appreciate, benefit from any of this TI stuff, right? It is conceivable, however, that it's conceivable anyway that I can leverage an answer to a question occasionally. I got very frustrated last night because I had to ask the simplest question in the world 10, 15 times before I finally got a very begrudging, angry answer. And my question was simply, hold on a second, are you saying you believe that if you don't like something, that means there's something wrong with that thing, that it needs to change? Do you agree or disagree? And after pulling teeth for a long time, he finally said, no, I do not agree. Which means he does think that if he doesn't like something, that's a commentary on that thing rather than on himself. There are occasions when somebody is being wicked, hurting feelings, being bullyish, saying mean things, whatever. And in those instances, one's feelings are informative of the fact that one's boundary has been crossed. And then one can take that information and do with it what they wish. But that's not what's the issue here, right? It's not the issue that sometimes people are responsible for your feelings. The issue is my feelings are not responsible for what I'm saying. Instead, correctness is responsible for what I'm saying. I want to be correct, to say the correct thing, explain things well. And so, hopefully, this video puts to bed the issue of bias, right? Yes, everybody has a variety of biases. No, not everybody is always biased about this thing that they're adjudicating. But they're biased about something, and they bring a variety of subjective biases into any adjudicatory opportunity. The thing is, if they are TI high up, they will be literally unable to fool themselves or believe what their ego wants or their bias wants at the expense of defensible parsing of words. I could not possibly do that because if it's not the best argument, I already know that it's going to lose if any smart person says the following thing. So that's why it's important for people who aren't TI top stack, up high, or front stack anyway, for them to come to terms with the idea that personality types make us very, very different from one another. And it's likely the case that FI Tool has a great deal of difficulty, if it's possible at all, to avoid making decisions based on their FI Tool, what they want, what they feel subjectively, that doesn't validate externally at all. And accordingly, you really shouldn't be talking about typology or anything, right? Like, we each have our various wheelhouses and lanes. I'm terrible at some things, I'm a natural at other things. Maybe somebody in the comment can give me some advice. How does one convey to an ESFP who one really is actually trying to help to say, no good is going to come from you pretending to be fluent in this kind of intellectual work? You're not, you absolutely never will be. And it's going to be a painful experience trying to insist you're something you're not in a community of people who uniformly have better understanding of typology than you. You're going to get nothing but pushback, eye rolls, people saying you don't know what you're talking about, etc. So what can we do? How can we help ESFPs? They're not all like this. I think it's kind of an unhealthy expression of it, but how do we help them to understand that you could thrive, you could be a champion, you could be fantastic, doing a fantastic job in life, but you need to go focus on something that's in your wheelhouse. And more importantly, not focus on something that you are constitutionally, ontologically incapable of ever doing. It takes a little humility, it takes a little bit of willingness to check yourself before you wreck yourself, have a come to Jesus moment. But I can promise you and every other person in this boat, you will receive no benefits from clinging to the wrong type label. It won't make you be like that type description. It doesn't work like that, right? If I have a certain cognitive function configuration, and it's something that we can assess with replicable tests and stuff, well, then the label is just informative to me about why I am how I am. But for people who have a really weak relationship with maps, they seem to be under the impression that they're claiming this label, and if somebody calls it into question, that somebody is attacking their ontology. That they know what they are. How could anybody else know what they are better than them? With their experience and their ability to know deeply how they feel and stuff. Is there a solution? I don't know. It's like, how do you wake someone up? Like, and say, what? Let's say Johnny goes to school, takes a test, gets everything wrong. And he's like, I'm really getting good at this math stuff. And the teacher's like, you got everything wrong. But Johnny writes an A in his grade book for his own reference. And next test, same thing. And he's like, you guys do not understand this stuff at all. I've gotten straight A's on all these tests. And you think that you know better when I'm the one who got straight A's? She's like, you did not get any A's. You got every single question wrong. How do you make that student aware that they're locked in some kind of a Dunning-Kruger morass, How do you get them to let go of their ego attachment to being good at something that they are completely incapable of being good at? How do you convince a tone-deaf person not to play music? If they're so tone-deaf that they don't even know they have a pitch problem. And that's a situation I was dealing with last night. Any suggestions, anybody? Or is it just a lost cause? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.